So let's do lacrosse. Start with the win, I think. And then Greg and I did this game earlier today here on WUSB, and we were talking over, when the season started. We circled this little stretch, this 3-game stretch over the course of 8 days. Last Saturday in Florida, and then this past Thursday at Northwestern, and then today against Johns Hopkins. 3 ranked teams all in a row. Okay? And not only that, they're not a week apart. They're all within that 8-day stretch because the Northwestern, and not only that, you're going down to Florida, up to Chicago, and back to Stony Brook. So it's a road trip to boot. So you are trying to get an at-large bid in the NCAA tournament, kind of like what women's basketball did with the WNIT, and you need wins. You need to maintain your ranking. The ranking is everything right now because the conference schedule doesn't figure in. It's nothing to fall back on. So you need it. And the Seawolves hit a little bit of a bump in the road going to Northwestern, losing to the Wildcats there on their rather odd indoor facility, and then coming back to Laval Stadium, at least in the first quarter, looking like they did when they were playing in Evanston. So, Greg, take it from here.
Yeah, so, when they started off today, they're down 4-1, 4-2 at the end of the first quarter, and they look sloppy. Johns Hopkins was winning the draw controls, and they were also winning the pace of play. They were playing a Johns Hopkins style of game, right? And Johns Hopkins was able to take advantage a little bit of some of the pressing defenses that Stony Brook had been running, and they were able to hit some inside cutters for some feeds and some goals. And defensively, they were able to shut off Stony Brook's dodges early. They were able to get the Dodgers into certain areas where they weren't going to be taking high quality shots. They were able to make saves and they were able to clear the ball. So it was really getting the pace of the game was going in Johns Hopkins directions. But that changes in the second quarter. So I don't know what Coach Spallina said or did in that break between the first and the second quarter. But man, they really jumped and got moving in that second quarter and wound up winning that second quarter. At halftime, it was 8-4 at half, and they really got playing some nice lacrosse at that point in time. And they were really fun to watch today from the second quarter on. So second, third, and fourth quarter, man, they played some nice lacrosse.
15 out of 16 goals after the first quarter. Actually, even it started in the first quarter when they were down 4-1. 15 out of 16, and eventually winning the game 16-5. And I'm just looking at the recap here on StonyBrookAthletics.com, and you can too. And I believe Cam runs the social media on this, so on Twitter, death taxes, heart dunking at home. And that was not a given. Great play that they show here on the video, but the real star of the game, on the other hand, was Siobhan Rafferty, because when the Seawolves needed to get going, she basically carried the team on her back.
Yeah, I was going to say that. And it was really started in that second goal they got. Rafferty scored the first goal for them as well, then scored the second on the player-up opportunity to wrap up the first quarter. Then the second, she got her hat trick, making it a one-goal game. And after Ellie Macera scored a pair, it was Rafferty again just throughout the contest. I think she just has a great eye and utilizes just great speed and power to fight her way to the net, fire off some really tough shots to defend. And it's what makes her one of the best scorers in the game today. And it was, as you said, it was really that was, I think, the motivation and what fired up the team to go on a roll here. And John Hopkins just didn't have an answer to stop her.
Yeah, that you're so concerned about Macera and Hart and their dodging ability and their ability to get to the goal. And then you throw in a Sabella or a Hampel and the way that they've been playing as well, too, that Rafferty just has that ability to find herself in an open area. She has an uncanny ability to do so. And her stick skills are so good. She's able to handle some of these awkward passes or bad passes where she's catching them cross-handed, she's catching them low, and she can finish and dunk them away. right? So when they're playing well, I think she's going to be playing well because it means that the focus is on the other players. They're causing slides to go to Hart or Massara or Sabella or Hampel, and then she's going to find herself wide open. What a nice job she did today.
Yeah,
And I'll tell you this. We mentioned it during the broadcast, too. I mean, it was bitter cold out there, is now, and we had a little bit of snowfall just leading up to that, and I was just so frustrated just getting it here tonight. But the important thing here is that it was in the 20s when we started at 12 noon, and it got a little bit warmer as time went on. But the bottom line is, and everybody knows what a lacrosse stick is made out of. It's either a metal or composite shaft, and the cross itself the frame of it is, it's not actual rubber, but it's rubber-like plastic. And that plastic hardens in cold weather. Okay, they don't make a special one like they do snow tires. And that means that, and you can see it, because you say, look at the turnovers, JHU, 20 turnovers to Stony Brook's 13, and a lot of that happened when balls bounced out of sticks. And you could tell that the feel was different, and let's face it, when you're handling, and again, the women play barehanded. They don't wear those hockey-type gloves the men do. You're handling a metal stick in 25-degree weather, you're going to feel it. And not the good part of, not good stick feel either. It's going to be painful.
Yeah, and some of those turnovers that they had were just overthrows where you could tell that the players for Johns Hopkins they didn't have the touch or the feel on the stick. And to Stony Brook's credit, they played through it. It wasn't even an issue for them. There was never a time where you thought to yourself, man, they don't look sharp. Or, well, in the second, third, and fourth quarter where you would say, they don't look sharp or they don't do, it's the cold seems to affect them. It didn't really seem to affect them the whole game. And who I thought played in particular had a nice bounce back game, Ken, was Charlie Campbell. Yeah.
Seven
really
saves, 5 goals allowed. Rafferty is part of player of the game, but Campbell, I think, is right behind her, even though she didn't have to do too much because of how different the differential was. But again, going back to that game on Thursday with number 5 Northwestern, number 6 Stony Brook, Campbell really struggled against Northwestern. She got pulled through the end of the first half after she allowed 9 goals, only had 2 saves, and Cameron also stepped in. It did a bit better. She had 3 saves, still allowed 7 goals. That game was pretty much done by the third quarter. But yeah, for Campbell, it was big for her to bounce back, get her confidence back, which is huge. It was a lot better, faster on the ball, made a really good save in the first quarter too, to even when they were down, still keeping Stony Brook in the game, which again, I think was a difference maker for this game and the game against Northwestern, to where once Stony Brook fell, it was really tough for them to battle back. Remember, Northwestern put up 9 in the first half to the Seawolves 4, and the Seawolves, they battled back in the third, but it really wasn't enough. And by the time they put up 5 goals in the fourth quarter, the game was pretty much done.
Yeah, and Matt, you said it during the game. There was 1 or 2 saves in there where you just said, Campbell saw it the entire way.
Yep.
There, right? She saw it when it came off the stick, and she didn't really feel that from her in the Northwestern game.
No, there's a couple that she should have had that she just didn't.
And I think as a goalie, it's like you're a pitcher. Sometimes you're just not going to have your stuff.
But also depends on what the action in front of you. Also, I think, especially with goalies, what your defenders are doing, because sometimes a ball can sneak through a well-screened shot. But I mean, the defenders, I think today, the defense of Stony Brook was terrific.
It was a lot better for sure.
Yes, yeah. And that, I think the number of shots you see, the type of shots you see, are very heavily influenced by the defense.
Yeah, and let's also say that Northwestern is definitely more capable than Johns Hopkins was. They have a better team. They have better defenders. They ran the field better than
they played their games. Really, what it was.
Yeah, they really did. They controlled the pace of the play on Wednesday. Northwestern for sure. So you have to give them credit, Northwestern, for the way that they played the other day. They really kind of took it to Stony Brook. I will say though, with the Northwestern game, when you have these, Matt, and you brought it up to start off the women's section, when you have these 3-game stretches, I always think the middle game is the toughest one. right? Because the first one you can prepare for, and the last one is kind of like the jump, the jumping off. The last one is the final game. So that one in the middle can be lost, and I think it's maybe one of the more difficult ones to prepare your team for, because they traveled to Florida and then they traveled to Northwestern. So you got a lot of travel going on. You don't have a ton of preparation. It takes a lot out of you when you do those things. And, I think you just kind of even though it's a big game, it gets overlooked a little bit because of all the things you have to do to make that game happen.
Yeah. So with that travel, it does prepare them, though, for what's coming up in the next week. Or plus, obviously, facing Hofstra at Hofstra on Friday, and then facing Brown in Rhode Island Tuesday at 5 p.m., March 22nd.
Well, that's the other thing, too, is that since Joe Spallina's been coach here, he likes to set the schedules up to, get a bunch of tough games in rapid succession in that 8-day stretch. Is it the exact duplicate of tournament play? Not necessarily, but it's close enough. Okay, Thursday and Sunday. Usually it's Thursday, Saturday that they set these up. As a matter of fact, I'm just looking if there are any later on in the season. No, but there are some intermediate games in there that are, there to, well, actually, you know what? I believe they go one game a week for the rest of the season. So, in any case, no, correction, UMBC and Yale, Saturday and Monday. There you go. They put a non-conference game in there, second to last game of the regular season. But the point now is that I wouldn't exactly call it a rest against Hofstra or Brown or Vermont, but it's now a stretch that's not quite as intense as these three. First of all, they're not big road trips. You go to, Uniondale, Stewart Stadium, and then you go to Providence, Rhode Island with Brown, and then back home against Vermont before you have to face 10th ranked Princeton. And again, that's not a big road trip. That's down in New Jersey. So your schedule is an opportunity to make hay while the sun shines. And this is where, can you go so far to say that the Seawolves should run the table the rest of the way? I think they need to.
Yeah, me too. Because, again, that loss to Northwestern, we said it, that whoever's losing that game is getting knocked out of the top 10. And for this one against Johns Hopkins, whoever loses this game is getting knocked out of the top 20, top 25.
Here's the thing. That I said this during the broadcast, Greg. The thing the what I like, okay, first of all, it was on the road at Northwestern. Okay, first of all, you got those things stacked against you. So it wasn't a bad loss. It wasn't what Stony Brook did to Johns Hopkins today. It wasn't 16-5. It was 16-12. So I think that figures in. You don't go down too far after a loss like that. I mean, look at some of the losses that Northwestern has had. Look at some of the losses Hopkins has had. Okay. And a loss like that is definitely up there with them, and they didn't really have to sacrifice too much in the rankings. But on the flip side of that, this Hopkins win probably keeps them from going down too far. They might stay in the top 10, I think. They might drop a couple of places, but I don't think they're going much further down than that.
Stony Brook is tough because right now, just where they're at, they're above number 7 Duke team that's 8-1, number 8 Michigan 7-1, Loyola who's undefeated, Princeton who, as we said, is number 10. This week they won their game. So to me, at number 11 is Denver, and then you get to number 12 Florida, who Stony Brook beat. So to me, I really see them in that 11 to 12 range. If they're top 10, I think they're going to be 9 or 10. Even though they were able to defeat Johns Hopkins, obviously, and the loss, as you said, Northwestern really wasn't that bad. It's just, I think, as we said, obviously, first off, it's Stony Brook, so they're, more often than not, they're punished more heavily than other teams.
The reason why I'm encouraged
of the rest of the schedule as well.
Reason why I'm encouraged also is because when they lost to Syracuse, neither Syracuse nor Stony Brook went anywhere. They stayed at 3-4.
Yeah, man, I think it's a good point. I think they're going to drop a little bit with the Northwestern loss because they have 2 losses. They're only 3-2 right now. They've played less games than I think a lot of these other teams have. But when you're ranked high, low, whatever, when you're ranked 5 or 6, I don't think you drop as far when you lose a game as when you lose a game when you're ranked 16 or 17. When you're 16 or 17, that could bounce you right out of the top 20, right?
Which
Because
is
there's
probably
other
going to be
teams
John
that are kind of,
Hopkins.
I can't see how. Well, they also lost to Navy in overtime as well too.
Yeah.
But
Or
I
25th.
can't. Yeah, but I can't see a team go from 5 or 6 to 16. I can't see that kind of a drop. That would be a dramatic drop.
I don't see it going that far. I also say for Michigan, number 8 Michigan, they did lose against Denver, so that could be who were ranked 11th. So that could definitely be in Stony Brook's favor to where wherever Michigan goes, you could expect Stony Brook to be a rank above it, or worse, behind it. So maybe that does keep them in the top 10, as we see Denver probably take one of Stony Brook or Michigan's spot. It was going to be Duke taking the 6th spot, and then Denver probably climbs up to 7 or 8.
Think about it, guys. Stony Brook's 2 losses were against top 5 teams.
Yeah,
it's true. It really is. I think what they need to have is both Syracuse and Northwestern continue to win. They need Florida for sure to continue to win. And I think you might be right, Matt. I think they might have to beat Princeton.
Oh, definitely. I think so. Yeah, if they want to stay top 10, beat Princeton, I think. And
the only thing that changes with that, now you kind of go from that basketball thing. You're going to get teams, there's going to be, like, if Syracuse stays at 3, UNC's at 2, I mean, the automatic qualifier for the ACC is going to be one of those 2 teams, right? So you still, it kind of leaves at-large bids out there, right? Unfortunately, they're going to lose the America East at-large bid, right? So that'll go to a different team. So you have to kind of start playing that game a little bit. You start looking at, okay, who's going to be the automatic qualifier from the Ivy? Who's going to be the automatic qualifier from Bang Bang? And you kind of bounce those. Who's going from the Big Ten? Who's going to be the automatic qualifier for them? That's what will happen if you lose to Princeton. I think if you beat Princeton, I think you run the table, I think you're automatically in.
It's another interesting thing here, too. I mean, Stony Brook, of course, has not been beaten in an America East game in 5 years. So we know that. But the what if, we were always talking about what ifs when we got to the America East tournament. What if Stony Brook falters and loses in the semis or the finals? So they get an automatic bid anyway, in addition to the automatic qualifier, and we never had to deal with that. But this is a situation where we're dealing with it no matter what. The automatic qualifier is going to another team no matter what, because they can't be in the tournament. So they're playing for an at-large. But the trick here is, if they lost in the tournament, that would be considered a very bad loss because they'd been so dominant for so long. If they're not in the tournament, there's no bad loss there.
Mm-hmm.
So that actually may help them, ironically enough.
Yeah, I almost wonder if they're going to try and put another game in at the end of the season.
Yeah, I definitely think that's the plan, because Coach Polina has mentioned that a couple times before, where they got an extra game open. And you got to think, with no conference tournament, they could find an opponent in JMU who also don't have a conference tournament to play for, and those two have history as recently as 2018.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to do so. I think it certainly makes it. Now, here's the the risk reward there. If you run the table, do you want to play another team? If you don't run the table, I think you do want to play another team. But I also think if you anticipate making the playoffs, making the NCAA tournament, now Coach Polina is going to say, you remember having talking about with the women's basketball team, having a couple weeks off might have been good for them, recharge the batteries, get them going. Coach Polina sounds like he's in the opposite direction, where he doesn't want that extra time off. He's
definitely a proponent of keeping the team fresh, and you see it in the schedule pattern, you see it in that 8-day stretch. He wants them to be challenged all the time.
Yeah, he wants to keep them right at the edge, right? He wants to keep them right at the edge, and keep them motivated the entire time. And it's commendable as a coach to do that, because I think it forces your players to take risks and get better.
Okay, so next up for the Seawolves, as we said, They will go to Short Stadium on Friday, March 18th, the day after St. Patrick's Day. That is a 7 p.m. start. We will be bringing it to you. We made a slight change to the schedule because baseball, their America East opening series, which takes place at Joe Nathan Field over the weekend, we'll get the Sunday game in. We're going to get the Friday game in, but instead we decided to go indoors, have an indoor press box over at Short Stadium, and bring you the women versus Hofstra. And let's face it, I mean, you do have a team. First of all, if you're not, understand if you couldn't make it to Laval Stadium and put us on the radio, that's great because it was bitter cold. But as the weather gets better, this is the team to watch. And as much as good as the men's lacrosse has been, as good as baseball and softball are, this is a team that has the best chance overall of representing Stony Brook in the NCAA tournament in the spring. And that, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Okay, this is a nationally ranked top 10 team.
Yeah, the women's programs have done much better against ranked teams than the men's squad, who we'll talk about right now, suffering their second straight loss against a ranked opponent, this time against ranked Brown.
Yeah, and I think today's game was really about goaltending. And the goaltending for Brown, they just came against the goalie that was just hot.
Yeah.
He made 18 saves for Brown, and he made some big saves in the fourth quarter to keep it a three goal game there. So I want to say that I kind of did everything right except for they just couldn't finish. And that's the hardest thing to do there. Ken, what was the goalie's name there? Connor. Yeah. So
career high 18 saves.
Yeah, I was getting the updates. I had actually a friend who was at the game,
right?
And he just said that he's just so dominant. He was so hard.
Yeah, and that Stony Brook was winning at halftime 5-3. It was a rainy day, mind you, which was another factor they had to play through in cold rain, and didn't really stop the offense too much in the first half. But that second half was really Brown flipped the switch, went on a 6-0 run or a 7-2 run, including a 6-0 run in the third quarter. And that's really, as you said, lacrosse is a game of runs. And here we saw it in favor of Stony Brook on the women's side, and in the men's side, it was in favor of Brown, where, Palma just couldn't get a stick on some of these shots. They were really good shots. And really, Seawolves' defense, I thought, was pretty good. Holding Brown to 10 games is the fewest they've scored all season. And this is a top 10 team in terms of scoring. But at the same time, just the offense really faltered there. And again, running to a hot goalie, he made the saves he needed to. And Stony Brook, again, probably going to fall out of the receiving vote stage, I think, another loss here. 2 straight losses to ranked teams.
Yeah, and not only that, they scored 2 goals in the second half period. Okay, That isn't just great goaltending. That's also not great offense. And they got scored 6-1 in the third, and they ended up losing by 3. So they kept it close, to their credit. But this is you have to make the argument that of the 2 losses that they have had, and of course losing to Rutgers, the 4th-ranked team in the nation, and going toe-to-toe with them, and Rutgers, barely coming out on top. You can't make too many arguments. That's one of those, just like the women versus Syracuse, I kept comparing the two, where the teams basically held serve and somebody had to win, but the Brown game was a clunker. You have to tell like it is here. It was not their best performance by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, and even too when the offense was out shooting Brown, when it mattered most is really, I think, where that third quarter was the difference maker. Brown outshoots Stony Brook 12-9, gets 7 of those shots on goal, 6 of them find the back of the net. Palm was only able to make 1 save there, where he looked great out of the other 3 quarters. And Connor Thoreau was just on his game. He stopped everything, just about everything the Seawolves sent. Made 6 saves in the third, which was the most he made in any quarter of the game, and that was a difference maker. Stony Brook committed more turnovers, playing more aggressive game. When Brown was coming back and from playing from behind, even though Renz Collin had another good game, going 16 for 21 from the X, they just weren't able to capitalize, Greg.
You know what? And I think, Ken, when you bring up that 16 out of 21 from the face-off X, I think that is a huge stat there. I mean, that's a great game for Colin Renz, but
he's
to
having a great
Matt's
season.
point, he really is. I'd like to see him calm down some of the extracurriculars as the game is going on, but at the face-off X, he's actually doing a really nice job. But back to Matt's point, it is bad offense as well too, because you have so many more possessions when you win that many faceoffs, and when you win that many faceoffs, you really expect to score more goals, right? When you're winning faceoffs, you're getting the ball, you're getting more possessions. You should dominate the time of possession as well too, and you should be able to score more goals. It was really the first time that we saw Stony Brook's offense, get slowed down.
Yeah.
7 goals for them is really uncharacteristic.
It's the first time they've been held single digits. Even
7
against
goals
LIU,
a
they scored
quarter
10.
for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can do that. And I felt like the LIU game where it was that 10-6 win there.
Yep.
I thought that was because it was that the Long Island Cup piece to it, right? The Friday, Sunday, almost the 1 day off in between the games. I think could be very difficult.
I think both teams might have been a little tired, yeah. But, they did put on a nice show for everybody. And, of course, the LI Cup Championship is not going to look the same in subsequent years. Hofstra may still host it, but Stony Brook probably can't be part of it because that would be a conference game. But that's another can of worms I'll figure out later. But opportunity to rebound comes quickly because you got the America East opener against UMass Lowell on Wednesday, and then you got Syracuse Saturday afternoon. So Wednesday, 3:45 p.m. here on WUSB, and Syracuse, 2:45 p.m. Now, of course, some of it does depend on what the women's basketball team does as far as the WNIT is concerned, but right now we're sticking with that unless we hear otherwise.
Yeah, and again, this is a big week for Stony Brook because I said UMass Lowell, they're 6-0 all time against. Stony Brook has really had the Riverhawks number, and they average about 15 goals per game against the Riverhawks. So this is one of those, games where they really got to find themselves again and get that offense back into swing. I think they could do it, especially if Conlin remains dominant at the faceoff. And then you have Syracuse coming up on Saturday, which is you have a struggling Syracuse team. They're at 2-4 right now. They're at the bottom of the top 20, and then they're ranked 16 in Inside Lacrosse. So, if they manage to hang on, you're facing another potential top 20 team. And, this is a chance for them to get back in the swing of things. And if they are able to pull off the win against Syracuse, they could get themselves, back. They could take Syracuse's spot in the top 20 right now with that, 15-16 ranking.
I'll tell you this, that if you're going to face Syracuse for the first time at home ever, this is the Syracuse team you want to be facing. You don't want to have anybody named Gate on the field. Okay? This is definitely a Syracuse team you want to be facing because you have a good chance against these guys.
Yeah, I'm going to jump backwards and then forwards here. So backwards to what we were saying with the women with the Northwestern game. I think UMass Lowell is that trap game in the middle. You play Brown, who's number 16, and then you got Syracuse the next Saturday. So you got those two name recognition teams, and then you got UMass Lowell in the middle. You got to take care of business on Wednesday. You really have to come up with that win and make sure that you handle UMass Lowell. This has a similar feel to it that the men are going through right now, that the women went through last week with their schedule, where it's a little bit of a gauntlet here. I mean, UMass Lowell is not as difficult as Northwestern of Florida.
No,
for
they're
sure.
0-5 right now. So
yeah, but it's still 3 games in a week, and that's difficult to do in lacrosse. So UMass Lowell is put there on purpose for that reason, because they are, struggling right now. They're a little bit of a fledgling program as they're moving forward, but nonetheless, you still have to win that game. And listen, Stony Brook's lost their last 2 games. I mean, albeit to Rutgers by a goal and to Brown by 3 goals, they still are off their game right now. So, and I think the Syracuse is definitely not a winnable game, to your point, because they're going through a little bit of an identity change, right? Because, Gary Gates taking over as the head coach and Dave Pechamal is the assistant coach. What John Desko has done for the last 20 plus years is now pushed to the side, and you got players who are transitioning from what Coach Desko wanted to what Coach Gate and Coach Petramala want.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was, no Gate on the field, off the field is okay.
Yeah,
but no Gary Gate on the field. That's a funny thing. Like we were talking about the women, they now have a very long history versus Hopkins, but the men have only played Hopkins once, and that was in the NCAA tournament in 2012, the last time they made it. And Syracuse, they only started this series last year. So they went up there, lost 17-9. Now they're getting him at home. And I have to tell you that this will be, I safely guarantee, I think you'll agree, Greg and Ken, that this will be the most attended lacrosse game, other than a possible NCAA tournament game the women might be hosting, or men maybe, an NCAA tournament game that you'll see this year. Laval Stadium will probably be more packed than a football game because it's Syracuse, and Syracuse is coming to us.
Yeah, and I think it's the benefit of the pandemic from last year, right? So at one point in time, as you're putting your schedule together, you don't know, can you go play teams in Baltimore? I don't even know if you can travel into Baltimore at one point in time. So Syracuse is in New York, Stony Brook's in New York. They're both, they both got Division I lacrosse teams. You have to play the game. So
and lots of Long Island players among the current players and alumni. I mean, yes, we're going to see a lot of orange in that building, but you know what? It reminds me, again, this goes back to your days with the team and even earlier. You would always have a big name squad like a Penn or North Carolina or something like that they would come to Stony Brook, Seawolves Field, in the old days before Laval opened up, and they basically put on a clinic. And it was a recruiting trip, and it was also a little bit of a bone thrown to the Long Island guys, so they could have their families show up. But they would win like 18-4. Okay, they get beat up pretty good. Even the ECAC Lacrosse League, those couple of years we were in it, we only had one win, and that was against UMBC, who we ended up joining the America East with the following year. So, it was a tough game to play them, but at least you got to go up against a named school. Now, of course, Notre Dame has emerged as a major power over the years, and the very first Stony Brook Division I men's lacrosse game was an overtime win against Notre Dame at Seawolves Field, and I called it in 1989, how long I've been doing it. But anyway, but the whole point is that the traditional lacrosse powers have not even recognized Stony Brook's existence on the planet until recently. I think it's a lot to do with Joe Spallina's sons going to Syracuse.
Yeah, and I think when you bring up the Johns Hopkins thing with the men's program earlier, and you talk about the big, Johns Hopkins has to play all the Maryland teams. Right, because they're just so close. How do you not play them? And now that they're in the Big Ten, now you have the Big Ten teams you have to play. So when you look at that, it's like they really don't have much maneuvering in their schedule. It's like these are the teams that you're going to play, and they're going to play Syracuse every year because of the natural rivalry, Hopkins-Syracuse, that was the 80s into the 90s. So they're going to play that on a regular basis as well too. So I think that's part of the problem as well too, is a lot of these traditional programs have locked into these natural rivalry games. They've gone into conferences and they've gone away from other conferences. So, Syracuse going into the ACC in lacrosse, or really in all sports, I guess, also changes. They lose some of the teams that they used to play in the Big East, right? So you're going to try and continue to play a Villanova or Georgetown if you're Syracuse, and you got your other natural upstate rivals of Cornell and Albany, which is games that you played, and probably Hobart as well too is on their schedule. Those are games they would play every year because that's just the natural rivalries for them up there. But I think you're right. Stony Brook is at a point right now where offensively they can compete against Syracuse for sure. Syracuse is as talented, I think, as they always are. They're just not unified in what they're trying to do right now. I watched a little bit of their game today against Johns Hopkins.
Yeah, they lost.
They lost. I think it was 10-7.
Yeah, it was. And Hopkins is ranked 19th, so that'd be a great time to face Hopkins too.
Yeah, so I do think that it's going to be. I think it's going to be one whale of a game because the firepower, like you were saying years ago, not necessarily you wouldn't have that kind of firepower on the offensive end. Now Stony Brook does, so they can keep up with a team like Syracuse and potentially knock them off, if you would call it knocking them off, right? If they're that far down.
Well, you take what you can get, okay? Now, of course, if Stony Brook should win on Saturday, the Syracuse fans will say, yeah, we're having an off year. but Stony Brook fans say, we beat Syracuse.
Yeah, well, you have it even more of an off year now.
Yeah, that's the other point, too. But I do believe that Stony Brook, it's taken a long time, 30-plus years, and yes, part of it has to do with the fact that we play in the American East Conference, but the American East Conference, and men's lacrosse in particular, is not a lower-ranked conference. It has traditionally been strong. They have actually sent 2 teams to the NCAA. They have Torrington winners. There's some heritage there. So you can't necessarily write them off. And I think Stony Brook has been trying to work its way into the establishment, both men and women. And we know for a fact that lacrosse is about its establishment. On the flip side, expanding the tournament, giving AQs to conferences like the America East has really hurt the monopoly that schools like Syracuse and Hopkins used to have. Now they got to compete. I mean, Pichamala. I mean, look at how much he hadn't won an NCAA since 2008. Okay, they ran him out of town.
Yeah. I do agree with you. Expanding to 16 teams and having the automatic qualifiers changed the men's college lacrosse. It really did, because now players are saying, listen, I can get recognized and I can get, conference awards and All-American by going to other schools, and I can play right away. I don't have to go to Johns Hopkins and sit for 3 years and then maybe play when I'm a senior. And I don't have to do that at Syracuse. I can go to Albany, I can go to Stony Brook, I can go to Drexel, I can go to Hofstra, whatever it might be, and get an opportunity to play a high-level brand of lacrosse and get recognized while doing so.
Well, here's another one. I mean, another major move that occurred in college lacrosse was Bill Tierney taking the Denver job, because he built a program there. Of course, he was, he dominant at Princeton, and when Denver finally won, and remember, Stony Brook played Denver in 2010 and beat them at Laval Stadium, and he wound up with 2 goals on the Sports Center top 10. Bill Tierney built that program into a powerhouse, wins the national championship, and that was the first college. He was the first college coach to win an NCAA D1 championship west of the Eastern Time Zone.
Yeah,
can you believe that?
Yeah, and he was the guy to do it, right? Because he has that cachet from all those national championships at Princeton, right? So he could draw players to come to Denver.
Yeah, thin air notwithstanding, too.
And with the advent of the Canadian influence on the men's lacrosse game, he was able to pull some Canadians in that were definite scorers.
So did we.
Changed. Yeah. And that's really been a change in it as well, too. I think one of the things that Stony Brook does really well, recruiting-wise, is they recruit the island very well, and they get Canadians, right? So that kind of brand has been really good. I'd like to see him get a couple more upstate guys. I'd like to see some of the upstate guys come down and play. One of the complaints that the upstate guys I've heard have is they just don't like driving through the city to come watch their kids play. And I have sat on George Washington Bridge enough for the.
I can't blame them.
Yeah,
I mean, the city is essentially an embolism that gets in the way.
Yeah, it really is. So, but I think that's what Stony Brook does really well is that they get those Canadians. And you just look at the team that they have now. McCann and Anderson, both Canadian players, both high scorers.
But it all started with Crowley and McBride,
but
11, 12 years ago.
For the program, I think Polinetti from Ward Melville has the opportunity to change a couple of those high level performers on the island to come to Stony Brook.
Absolutely.
It could be a big deal to get a big time Division I midfielder from the island. Could be a really, really big deal for Stony Brook. An attack. When they already have an attack, they can get another one.
He could do for Stony Brook what the Big East Conference did for the New York players in college basketball. Okay,
absolutely.
And a lot of them wound up with Dean Smith in North Carolina. But after the Big East started out, a lot of them stayed in the conference. They'd go to Syracuse with Jim Boeheim. They'd go to Georgetown. They'd stay at St. John's. All these players stayed home, which was one of Dave Gavitt's original goals, forming that conference. But it was one of the things that Stony Brook had struggled with a little bit, because stay home, number one, let's face it, look at the schools that have strong lacrosse programs. And I've always said this. I've said this to some of the top players like Ryan Boyle when he was with the Titans. Smart guys play it, meaning that guys who are good academically and want to get a good education, Johns Hopkins is a great school. The Ivies, okay? A lot of top-ranked academic schools have good lacrosse programs. So you have to, and lacrosse is not football or basketball. You have to make the grade, or else you're gone. And that way, and you see the other thing that's the lacrosse greats have proven is a lot of them are very shrewd business people, because what they've done, instead of necessarily build long pro careers, because there really isn't much money in that, as coaches, as running camps, running clinics, endorsing equipment, designing equipment, and look at the Gate family, for example, Gary Gate, Paul, and that whole lineage. So they were able to build careers that weren't necessarily centered around them continuing to play.
Yeah, and let's be honest, you say you really don't make any money playing. So, and I think that's also what the attraction of those really excellent schools is for the players, is you're going to graduate with a degree, and that degree is going to really mean something from some of these schools, right? There's a handful of those schools that are really difference maker schools. The Ivy Leagues, those are life-changing schools, right, to go to. Georgetown is a life-changing school. Johns Hopkins is a life-changing school. So when you get into one of those schools and you play for one of those programs, there is a sense of what is occurring after you play. So